Hello, crypto miners and everyone chiming in to this very exciting interview or AMA with IOTA. My name is Mary and I will be your host. Yes, I am a little bit sick, but I will try my very best not to cough in your ears. I also want to remind you all that this is for educational purpose only and should not be taken as a financial advice as usual. So you have to do your own research. I'm still looking for our guest from IOTA, Mr. Jonas Theis. Theis? Are you here, Jonas? You have to raise your hand because there's so many in here already, so I can't see you otherwise. Or ask to speak, you do here on Twitter. Can we see Jonas? Well, I don't see anyone who has the name Jonas. Maybe your name on Twitter is something else. Anyway, just ask to speak and I will unmute you. Let's wait a few minutes.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
There he is. Hi, Jonas. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Hi, sorry for that. I needed to join on my phone.
Oh yeah, that's the thing here on Twitter. You can't talk or if you are not on your phone, which is a little bit special, but yeah, as long as you know, it's all right, I guess. So welcome, Jonas. As I said before you joined, we are here at Crypto Miners, and we are having IOTA here with us today. And our guest is you, Mr. Jonas Theis, research engineer at IOTA. And I'm very pleased to welcome you up and maybe present yourself to our audience a little bit.
Yes,
Who you are and when did you start with crypto?
yes. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the platform. I'm very happy to be here. Excited about the questions that come up. And well, I'm working with the foundation, with the IOTA Foundation since beginning of 2020, but interested in crypto I'm since 2015, 16 or so. Was also one reason then why I decided to do my master's degree in the realm of distributed systems. So my background is in distributed systems. I'm a computer scientist, security, system security, parallel computing, and these sort of things. Back in the days, there was no specific degrees regarding blockchain or DLTs, I think. So that was the closest you could get. And I did that, and then subsequently joined the IOTA Foundation.
Great. So is it the first project that you work with, or have you been working with others before also?
In the DLT space, it's the first, but yeah, before that, I've been working on as a backend developer, like these kind of things. What you do as
Okay.
engineer, basically, as a computer scientist, right?
Yeah, very good. What do you do as an engineer? I ask me
Yeah,
that sometimes. There's so many different kinds of engineers, right? Anyways, very nice to
yes.
meet you, and very happy to have you here. Could you also maybe tell us a little bit about the team that you work with? I mean, the IOTA has been around for a long time, if you count in crypto years, anyway.
Yes. Yes, yes. Yeah, I can say a
So,
little
so
bit
I,
in general about IOTA and the
yeah.
foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the foundation is situated in Germany, and it's there since 2017, and it's a non-profit foundation. The protocol IOTA itself, I think, was was conceived of basically in 2015, so it's early days. There wasn't any pre-mine or anything, so there was just a crowd sale basically, and the foundation was founded with donations from community members and income through grants and work together with corporate partners. Back in the days, also that's what attracted me to IOTA was a very strong vision. No miners, users secure the DLT, it's feeless, and it's basically meant to be the communication layer for IoT. That was the vision back then. But the problem was the technology wasn't there. And now the vision has changed slightly and expanded, I would say. And we can get into what exactly that means in a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Um, but in general, so the technology wasn't there, and we are still working on IOTA 2.0, which will be, or which is the new IOTA, and has different properties and also an updated and extended vision, I would say.
All right. So the vision when IOTA started was what kind of problem did you want to solve then in this space? I mean, it was not a huge space back then. It wasn't not that many crypto maybe as it is now, but there was something missing, you thought, or maybe not you, but the IOTA Foundation or team thought it was something missing in the space and wanted to solve that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's exactly like feeless transactions, right? Scalable feeless transactions and being a backbone for IoT. That was the vision back in the days, and also importantly, no exploitations through miner, and in that way, basically having natural stakeholders, so meaning users as the primary users of the DLT, but also at the same time the people that secure the DLT, right?
And
And
IoT, for everyone who doesn't know, like Internet of Things, isn't that what it
exactly,
stands
yeah,
for, right?
Internet of Things.
And what is that really? I mean, um, first time I heard it, I didn't understand what it was, and I guess many in here maybe don't either. So maybe we should just take a brief explanation of what it is, so people can follow along.
Well, it seems like the Internet of Things is around the corner for a long time already. It's
Mm-hmm.
like maybe fusion, energy, right? It's also around the corner,
Yeah.
similarly. But it's basically the that your toaster, your fridge, or whatever, any device that you can think of is connected to the internet somehow and communicates in a smart way. Well, we have smartphones, but most of our other devices are not so smart yet, right? But the general idea is that every device, all the devices that you can think of, can be connected to the internet and they can do something smart, whatever that is. Like a fridge can notify you if something, I don't know, spoiled,
When the
for
butter is
example.
out.
Yeah, or the battery sound. Well, if it still can send a signal, then yes.
No,
But
not the battery,
yeah,
the butter, the
the
milk, or
butter.
the
Yes.
vegetables, maybe. Only one carrot left. No, but
Yeah.
also now the smart things in our homes are connected with like Google or these big giants, right? That can also track our lives and see everything, every step we take and every move we make. And isn't that also something that IOTA could help change, that we could be more in charge of our steps, so to say?
Yes, and that's actually very much the vision, the updated vision. It's not only for IoT devices, but for everyone. And basically the tagline that we have is digital autonomy for everyone. And that's the updated vision. And we kind of need to dive into what digital autonomy means, right? Everyone means, well, every person and every device. So it's a bit bigger than only IoT, right? It encompasses IoT as well because it encompasses all devices, but also for people. And what does it mean to be digitally autonomous, right? And as you said, exactly, it's a problem, or I see it as a problem, at least, that big companies or governments might be in control of our digital life, right? And so digital autonomy then means that you're in control of your digital life. That means that you're able to interact with other digital identities while you control your assets, your identity, your data, and while you have economic freedom, right? So no one can just freeze your bank account. No one can just take away your belongings, right? And it also means that you have fair treatment for all participants and for everyone, and that everyone is equally protected. And well, it should also be easily accessible and not be like for just some elite, right? That has access to the system. And similarly, I think, which is very important and a big problem of DLTs nowadays, is the freedom of the service providers, meaning miners or validators that might exploit or rig the system in their favor, right? For example, MEV. And all these things, if they're given, then I would say you can have digital autonomy, and we want to enable that for everyone, right? And so this is a bit bigger, and it encompasses more than only IoT as before.
So how far away are we from this, do you think? Or how close is this?
Well, I think our solution covers all of these things. And well, we've been working on this for quite some time, and it's a lot of time went by. Also, mistakes have been made, and it's due research. So I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the technology in general technology we're building, but well, we're building a DLT, right? But we're not building a blockchain. It's a DAG-based system, like for example,
Yeah, that's a
Zui
bit
and Aptos.
special,
And
right?
yeah, exactly. But the recent trend seems to be many protocols are looking at DAGs simply because of the benefits it provides. But of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? There's many problems or many challenges that you get with that. Like, for example, in a blockchain, you have a total order. In a DAG, you only have a causal order. So there's some problems there that you need to tackle, and it makes the whole system more complicated. But yeah, there's many systems like Sui, Aptos, Aleph Zero, also Cardano with their recent Layos paper are looking at dividing things a bit more and basically becoming a DAG as well. So there's I would say we're fairly close to having this vision realized.
So the tech technology is there, you will say, but it also has to be implemented and like mass adopted or so, what you can say by by everyone, basically, by the companies also maybe, and by us. So how can we get there, or what is IOTA doing to get there, to get it out, to get the word out, except for this AMA?
Well, well, so maybe a bit of background. So coming back to the old vision,
Mm-hmm.
and the old technology, um, that is IOTA 1.0, let's say, or the current IOTA, the current status quo, that couldn't deliver on that vision, right?
Okay.
That the technology, the vision was grand, and that's why IOTA was in 2017 also was very popular, right? But simply the technology wasn't there, and that's just how it is. But now I think the technology is there. We still need to finish up some things. That still will take a little bit, of course. As you know, engineering, there's always some challenges that come up, and it's also a combination of research and engineering, right? So you never know. There might be some little things coming up, and then in the end, you spend 80% of the time on the last 10% of the final product, right? As it usually is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in general, it is there, and we are currently in the process of kind of restructuring IOTA and the changes that we are applying to IOTA, the image of it, and how we present it, are highly influenced by this new protocol that we're building, IOTA 2.0. And then of course we need to educate more. The main thing we need to do is educate, more education, I think, so that people
Mm-hmm.
understand what we are building, and what is then to be running then the new network, and what are the possibilities of it, like what can you do with it, what is it good for, and why should someone build their application on top of our protocol, right?
Yeah, I mean, I see this as two steps at least. I mean, first you have to like show the engineers and the people who wants to build something or do something with this, and then also the normal daily life people out there who can use these things that maybe they don't understand how to build or what it is really, but it must be something that they can use and that can help them, because otherwise they won't change from what they do now, right? And
Yes, I think
yes,
most
so
importantly, there are the builders actually, right? Because
right now,
um,
yeah.
we are building a permissionless protocol, right? Like
Hmm.
Ethereum, and they are good. They are good to compare to, I think, or to look up to, because well, the protocol doesn't have any specific application. You can build whatever you want on top. So the important thing is this aspect of open source and permissionless innovation, which I think is one of the most beautiful things of the crypto space, um, so that everyone can just go and start building on top, and then users won't even, in the optimal case, they won't even know what they're using below, right? They're just
Exactly.
using something, and it's giving them whatever they want, and the builders use the system because it's easy to use. It doesn't have any high transaction fees, or no transaction fees for that matter, right? And these kind of things.
So would you say you said that it's more important to educate the builders now, the people who wants to build on top of this IOTA, and come out with some products and for users. But how will that then go on? I mean, do you feel like how long is this first phase then when people are going to build? I mean, it's going to go on forever probably, or very long time. You also have to get the normal people in there, right? And do you think that's more the builders? Oh, I'm losing some words sometimes, especially when I'm a little bit sick. My brain doesn't really work. But do you think that
That's all right.
it's the builder's mission to get it out there, to get the word out, or is IOTA gonna do something for that as well? That's what I wanted to ask, I think, if it made sense.
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not the right person to answer that. I think I can
Okay.
make a guess, or I can just give my opinion. But
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm just an engineer, right? So this is more
Yeah,
like
okay.
marketing.
You are for the builders.
But
I'm for the people.
yeah. So what I think what might happen. So if people are building on top of our protocol, they want to promote their own products too, right? And that
Yeah.
should, at least in my mind, maybe that's not how it works, but in
Yeah,
my
of course
mind,
they must. Yeah.
this would have a ripple effect down, right? But of course, yeah, if we can offer something to like a normal user, sure, then I don't see a reason why we shouldn't also target them as people to use the system.
Hmm. So now you're focusing more anyway
Integration, for
on to get the
example,
word out there for.
and
Oh, sorry, you disappeared there.
such things.
Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, how exactly we're going to go about that, that's out of scope for me, at least. I'm concerned with the technology mainly.
Mm. All right. So let's see. IOTA so far, or what you're doing now. I read that you're also having some uh, pilot studies or projects in East Africa. Maybe that if you can you tell us about that? Maybe that will show some light or shed some light over some of the things that can already be done.
Sure. So
Can you hear me?
there's,
Yeah, okay.
yes. Sorry. Is the internet connection breaking up?
Yeah, a little bit, but maybe we have a little bit of delay, but go ahead.
Okay. Sure. So, um, focused more on a corporate adoption, and we didn't really take part in the this this has changed. Um, what we think is important is corporate, but not so. Crypto is a valid use case, especially different protocols that are built there. So we are shifting also towards that direction a bit more. But yeah, so for example, there are many pilot projects with whole countries or even groups of countries for supply chain and other things. But again, I don't know that much about those things. I mean, I'm following them, of course, as well, but I'm really just an
Mm.
engineer. So
You're building it. So
yeah,
so what
there have been, but in general there has been more focus on this in the past, and now we started sort of excubating some of these things from the foundation in their own entities. Let's say to also decentralize the whole thing a bit more. The foundation was quite big, right? We were doing many different things, and now we started excavating those things in separate entities. Of course, all working still with the same protocol, but not within the foundation anymore, which makes the whole ecosystem also more decentralized, which is what we want, right? In the end.
But can you give us some practical examples that we can really comprehend easy? Where is it used already, your technology, today? Where in the world is it used already? And also maybe what could it else be used for and where? Can you hear me? I can't hear you now, Jonas. I don't know. Is it
No.
me or you? Can someone make a thumbs up if you can hear me? Am I audible? Maybe not. Okay, I see some thumbs up. Jonas, you are muted. You have to unmute yourself or we can't hear you at all. Maybe you have to leave and come back, Jonas. Yeah, people can hear me, they say, but we can't hear you, Jonas. But you are muted, that's why. There you go. Unmute
Not
yourself.
sure. Is it on my end or
Oh, now I can hear
can't
you again.
hear anything anymore?
Can you hear us, Jonas? I'm sending you a message. Maybe you should leave and come back, Jonas. Do we have someone else from IOTA here that can speak a little bit till we wait for Jonas to fix his... Well, he's an engineer. I have faith in you, Jonas. Who else can fix this if not an engineer? Can you hear me, Jonas?
Could you guys give some feedback if you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Check your messages. I sent you a message. So, all right, maybe I should leave and come back then. I'll be back, guys. So I'm back, guys. Can you hear me now, Jonas?
Yes.
Okay. Very
So
good.
sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but
No, we could hear you, but you couldn't hear us.
okay.
But sometimes it
I
helps
switched to
when I'm
mobile network now.
I left and come back, and then it works now. Let's see. So where were we? I wanted to know where in the world IOTA is used so far, like practical examples.
As I said, that would be a better question for someone that works in market adoption.
Okay.
Regarding IOTA, because there's many projects, I think, where it is being used, but I think the trademark South Africa is one of the bigger ones, and that's a supply chain use case.
I've heard that
and there's
okay, go ahead.
Some data use cases as well, that are doing that. But yeah, I'm not the right person.
Okay, so maybe you
more technical questions.
Have you heard about or know about this Jaguar and Land Rover project then, that it can collect data or drive to earn or something like that? Is that a thing?
Yes, but I don't know. Honestly, don't know about the status of those.
Okay. Let's talk about something that you know, Jonas.
We have a sort of blinds on, I could say, and working really towards the technology, like highly focused currently, and of course, looking what happens in the space. It's important too, but mainly focused on technology. That's at least my part of it.
So what is it that you're working on now? The new, the IOTA 2.0, you said, or is that Stardust?
Yes, exactly.
Is that the same as Stardust?
Well, in a sense, so Stardust is live on Shimmer, and Shimmer is the staging network for IOTA. It's similar to Kusama and Polkadot, their relationship. And in a sense, you could say yes, that is one update of IOTA 2.0 already. So it's upgrading the IOTA protocol, right? And many things that we have been researching in the past have made their way already into the current protocol. Like, for example, instead of account-based system, we are using UTXO-based system now. And that is already included in Stardust. And Stardust is an extension of that, enabling native tokenization and smart contracts on layer 2 and such things. So in a sense, that is already the first step of upgrading IOTA towards IOTA 2.0. Exactly. And I'm working on the very new features, so a new consensus, because currently the consensus is made by a coordinator that issues certain blocks and then basically sets certain checkpoints that reference other blocks in this DAG, and therefore these blocks are considered as confirmed. And the new IOTA 2.0 works vastly different in that sense, because it's a leaderless asynchronous consensus. It's sort of a Nakamoto consensus on a DAG, and we have many other things that are there, which we can go in depth to all of them. I'm happy to do that. Okay,
yeah, because it's a little bit difficult to follow for me because I'm not an engineer. So all these, I was thinking maybe we could talk about the difference between a normal blockchain and the DAG, as you call it.
Yes, sure.
Could you explain that?
So, yeah. So any blockchain is technically also a DAG. A DAG is just a directed acyclic graph. It's just a mathematical structure, right? And the blockchain has blocks that are ordered, right? And you basically just have one arrow to the previous block. That makes it also a DAG in that sense. It's just a chain.
It's only one way to go for the information.
Exactly. And in a DAG, it's the same. It's non-cyclic, right? Directed, So there's also only one way of information to go, but you can have multiple children. Like in a blockchain, this is a fork, right? If you have two blocks that at the same height, then this is a fork. But technically, you can have that too. And in Ethereum, you also do that with anchor blocks and these kind of things. So there is some sort of a DAG structure already, and that is all there is to it, basically, from the principle. But then instead of having blocks that contain a bunch of transactions, in our protocol, we just have blocks of size 1, and they contain 1 transaction. And what this enables, basically, is it enables you to have multiple block producers. So, for example, in a proof of work based blockchain like Bitcoin, you can have a very limited amount of block producers realistically, right? Like if you can only produce a block every 1,000 years or so, then this is not a very realistic chance for you to take part in consensus there, right? And when you can produce your own block, then you also have more autonomy, right? Because you don't need to rely on someone to take your transaction from a mempool, which is separate to the blockchain, right? And put it into a block for you, and then it gets ultimately proved by enough other blocks, for example, and then you can be sure everything is all right. But
so is it more secure, would you say, or less secure than, or is blockchain and DAG similar secure?
I wouldn't say secure. The right word is, I would say, exploitable here, because, well, exactly that mechanism of someone, like you want to send a transaction, right? And you have the separate mempool that is gossip between all the nodes in the network, and then the miners or someone that produces a block. Doesn't need to be a miner, can also be someone else. In a proof of stake blockchain, usually you have a slot, right, where you are allocated, and then you need to produce a block in your slot. And for producing a block, you just check whatever's in the mempool, and usually you do first price auction, right? So you take whatever pays the most fees, for example, and you include that to the block, right? But now, as the person or as the entity that produces this block, you have some power to change the order or to not include certain transactions because, well, they might be regulated, right? Or if you include them, then there might be some consequences for you, or you simply exploit because you see, hey, this person wants to do this trade. If I do that trade instead of that person, I just can include my own transaction, and then I just get the profit from that, right? And that's exactly what MEV is, right? Maximal or minor extractable value, or maximal extractable value, and that is one of the biggest challenges, I would say, currently in the space for blockchains, right? Because exactly that design allows for this. Now, if you compare that to what we have, we call it Tangle, but it's just a DAG of blocks. And now everyone that wants to issue a transaction just produces their own block and puts that into the data structure. And then you don't have miners that do this for you. So you cannot reorder this. You don't have a total order anyway, because it's a causal order. So no one can go and just put a transaction in front of you and not include yours. That is a different story. And you don't have the separate mempool. Like in blockchains, you have like this mempool that is really separate from the blockchain, right? But in our case, basically this DAG of blocks is the mempool. And we are building our consensus out of this structure, even because we also use it for voting on conflicting things if there's something conflicting happening. So if you issue a double spend, then you also cast your votes via this structure, which is why this is leaderless, what we call it, a leaderless consensus. And you cannot have something like MEV there. It's simply not possible. And I think that's great. And from the perspective of security, it's similar as a blockchain. It's a tamper-proof, immutable data structure where you take the contents of the previous things that you reference and you put it in the hash of that into your thing, and then it's a hash chain. It's very similar to blockchain in that regard. And you can even, if you have very low throughput in a DAG, for example, so you only have one person that wants to issue one block at a time. It's a very unlikely case, but let's assume that. Then you could basically build a blockchain, and every block has only one transaction in it, but it's then also a chain.
So are people gonna be able to build their own blockchains on top of IOTA?
Well, that depends. If you're talking about layer 2 and anchoring into IOTA and using it as a settlement layer, yes, for sure. That is not different than in other chains. I mean, we also have certain guarantees, right? Security guarantees through the consensus, certain liveness guarantees, and that's exactly the same as, for example, in Ethereum. If you can compute a ZK proof, for example, you can leverage L1 security, right?
So what I'm interested to know is who are you targeting really here? Who is your main customer or user of IOTA? Or who do you want to be the main user? Who are you building for?
Yeah, so what I think the protocol is very suited for is to be a settlement layer and a liquidity layer. And this is out of two main reasons. So first of all, in blockchains, you usually have only sequential processing, right? Because you can only process something once a new block arrives. So a new block arrives, and then you get a batch of transactions, and then you know these are in this block, and then you execute them, right? And in a DAG, you can do what I would call, or what is generally called, optimistic processing. So you can process transactions when they arrive. So that also means you can do that instead of in batches, like in blocks, right? You can do that in parallel, and you can utilize multiple cores for doing this because, well, they arrive at different times. So whenever they arrive, you can process them. And that is great because now if you, for example, have CK verifications or some other rather expensive execution that you want to execute, you can do that in a sort of stream, right? Like instead of in batches. So that is great. I think that's one reason why it's great for a settlement layer, because we can do execution in parallel and stream that. So we can also have fairly fast confirmation times, I would say. The second thing is why it's great as a settlement layer and liquidity layer is because exactly the fact that I mentioned before, that there can be no one that rigs the system, right? Because we can't have MEV. So if you cannot have MEV, it would be great if other protocols use us as a settlement layer, but also utilize L1 then as a liquidity layer and share and pool liquidity over different protocols, right? And since no one can exploit this or can negatively exploit this with MEV and harm users or do something like sandwich attacks, right, or front running, what have you, what can you do there? I think it's perfectly suited for this, for exactly these two use cases.
Okay. So I also read that there are like a few core sectors that IOTA focus on, and one is the social aspect. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, you have pretty low carbon footprints and
Yes, I think there are multiple facets to this. So, first of all, we don't want to utilize any proof of work, right? And we have a congestion control system in IOTA 2.0 that allows you to access the system based on a quantity we call mana. It's a resource that is a proxy basically of the token. So if you have tokens or you contribute to the system, meaning staking, then you get mana, so you're rewarded in mana, and the token supply stays stable, and then you can use that mana to access the system.
So what is mana? Is that a token or?
It's not a token. It's a resource that can only be used within the IOTA ecosystem.
Okay. For what? For what do you use it?
For accessing the system or interacting with the system. Like, for example, if you want to issue a block, instead of paying a fee in tokens, you pay with mana. And you get mana unconditionally if you hold tokens over time. So
but the IOTA token, or the IOTA MEOTA it's called, right? What is that used for?
That is, well, first of all, it gives you the right as an analogy, maybe you have the IOTA token, which is giving you which generates, let's say, wood, right? And you can use that wood as in mana, as fuel to access the network. So that is one thing, right? And you get this unconditionally, based on the amount you have, like relative to the amount you have. That is one thing. So the token grants you access to the system without expending the token itself. That's one use case. Then another use case is what we call a storage deposit. So because, well, let's go one step back. You have 3 resources that you usually need to protect in a DLT, right? And first one is storage. So the ledger state gets big, and nodes or people that participate in the ledger need to store these things. So you cannot make the storage as arbitrarily big as you want, right? So you need to protect this. Then another resource that is there is bandwidth. So you need to make, like, bandwidth is a scarce resource. It might advance with the future development, and maybe we'll have like terabit connections, everyone in their house in 10 years, who knows? But it's still at some point it's limited, right? And the same goes for execution. So these 3 resources: storage, bandwidth, and execution. And these need to be protected by the system, right? Because otherwise someone could just exploit those and clog the system, right? And, well, as I mentioned before, we have mana, which is a proxy of the token. So you get it when you have the token, so that everyone can access the network in a proportion of their holdings, basically. So if you have 20% of, that's an unrealistic number, but it's easy. For example, if you have 20% of the whole tokens, then you get on average 20% of the throughput of the network. And you don't need to expend your tokens for this throughput. It's just generated for you, basically, unconditionally. That's one thing. And with mana, you can pay for execution and for bandwidth, so for accessing the network. So that is one thing. Then the next thing is we have something we call the storage deposit. So if you send a transaction, or if you create a transaction, you need to pay a byte cost of the amount of bytes that your output, in UTXO terms, consumes. So if you send now 10 transactions and you send it to 10 different people, and then you need to pay probably more out storage deposit. It's actually not a pay. Pay is the wrong word, actually. You need to provide the storage deposit, sorry. Because that makes sure that the ledger can only get so big. There's a maximum amount of ledger size that we can get, which is defined by the overall token amount. So basically, what that means is, if you create a transaction or if you do something with a ledger, then you consume some space, and you need to pay a deposit that you get back if you consume this again. So if you interact again with the ledger, you get this storage deposit back, and for that you also need the token. So there's two main use cases for the IOTA token in the system.
And also I read that the network can be used to secure data like health records and stuff like that. So you can own your own health records.
Yeah. So that is, I mean, in a sense, any DLT can be used to store data, right? And that goes back to the storage deposit, and then the question is, how expensive is that, and is it worth your use case to have that expensive storage, right? Because it's probably a quite expensive storage, even if you get your tokens back at the end. But yeah, you can also communicate. You can also use the Tangle, our DAG, as a communication layer, and then prove that data existed before. Yes, without paying the deposit as well. But then you need to pay for the bandwidth still, right? So yeah, you can do that. And I think it's a valid use case if it's very precious data. But in general, I wouldn't send everything over that layer because, well, if it's not precious or you don't need to prove that the data existed later on, then maybe an off-chain channel is better because, well, it's still an expensive communication channel, right? So, and as long as it's not sharded, which is a whole different story. Hello. Whole different story. It will stay rather expensive, right?
Okay, yeah. So since I don't really understand as much these technological things, I think the Midnight is here. Maybe he has a technical question or something for you, Jonas.
The Midnight. I love you, man. To be fair, I'm trying to understand your tech stack here. You've got a few tools that are under, well, I think they're either developed or developer tools. I think for a developer, can you explain what Stronghold is and how you're going to get developers to use your ecosystem?
Yeah. So again, I haven't been working on this, so I can only give an informed opinion. But it is a tool basically that should strive to make whatever you do with your key material in memory as secure as possible. Well, I'm personally of the opinion that it cannot get more secure than having a hardware device doing this, right? I mean, that is the best you can do. And then, of course, the hardware device itself needs to be secure, but it's better to not have your keys even see the local device memory, right? And Stronghold is basically a suit that allows you to operate with key material of any sorts, and makes it, if you need to have it in memory, which I guess many people still have because they have their seed phrase on their computer, right, and not on a hardware device, then make it as secure as possible and easy as possible to interact with that key material without exposing it.
I see. Okay.
Which still means if someone has control to your system, they can still dump the whole memory, right, and search for the key.
Yeah.
So even if you do some obfuscation, you can make it harder, but it might be still possible to get to it. So I always say a hardware key is the proper deal, right?
Okay. So I'm looking at. I've been looking at IOTA. I in fact own a little bit. I'm not really a huge investor in IOTA, but there's a lot of things that you guys are trying to do, right? Especially the keyless ecosystem, etc., etc. as well as, I see that you're trying to revolutionize the supply chain industry. So when you're saying, but how are you impacting the supply chain industry? Are you guys looking at the change, like getting rid of the middleman, and people will directly use IOTA to establish communication or chain, like just say distribution? Will they use IOTA for distribution and communication? Will it just be communication in itself?
That is a very good question. And I think that in the past, we have promoted and have worked on data use cases a lot, which I think they're still valid, but they might need to move to a layer 2 eventually, or maybe even a layer 3, right? Depending on how you see the whole sharding space and fractal scaling, depending on how you see it. The thing is, yes, of course. I mean, we want to get rid of middlemen, right? Like that's pretty much like the goal of Web3, I would say. And as for supply chain, yeah, that's one specific use case, and IOTA might be suited for this because, well, access is feelers if you hold tokens. But then again, what I'm not sure if you joined at that time already, access, as long as we don't have a sharded network, even if you hold tokens and the network is feelers for token holders, might still be expensive, right? In the sense that you need to expense mana. And maybe I can go a bit more in detail in this direction, like the whole system around mana and how the feeless nature of it works. And then maybe the use cases also become a bit more clear. I'm not sure if that would help you guys. What do you think?
The thing is, in terms of like disturbing the supply chain, it's a difficult task, right? Because you got like a lot of competitors out there, especially some really wealthy middlemen, and they can actually disturb unless you've got a lot of connections and you got you're talking directly to the main suppliers, and the main suppliers tell the middleman, sorry, we're not going to use you. How are you going to make an impact? Because this is a difficult task.
Yes, I agree. But as I said before, I'm unfortunately not the right person. I see myself just as an engineer, just and that is more. So there is the trademark East Africa project, for example, like is a big contender for what you're mentioning, and there a bunch of countries and many companies, I think, are involved in streamlining this process. If you're interested more in this, then I guess we should invite someone from that department.
100%. You know, the thing is that
tell you guys much more about these things. I'm sorry.
The thing is, I've got my own channel that we have a lot of investors and we have our own businesses. So this is quite an interesting topic for us as well, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because it's a huge topic to sort on the world supply chain. And I mean, you know, having a proper discussion to understand what you guys are doing, it might be something that we, you know, even with miners, it probably could help you with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great to have some technical questions from you, John. Thank you so much. my head is not on top today since I'm a little bit sick. But
I've got another one actually. Hard one. This is more of an engineering question.
Let's just ask Jonas if he has how much time he has, because it's up to an hour now, so we don't strain his time. Do you have more time for more questions, Jonas?
Yes, I have more time. I need to leave my Airbnb in about an hour, but that's fine.
Okay, so let's go, John.
Okay. In terms of, like, you know, the fundamentals of the tech stack. What tech stack is IOTA using in order for it to comply with regulations, as well as how are they securing data and where is the data sitting? What type of like platforms, etc. And what are you guys coding in?
Okay, that's a lot of questions at once. So as for the tech stack that we're using, mainly Go especially for IOTA 2.0, we always need to a little bit distinguish between what is currently live and what we're talking about in the future. But mainly Go and Rust. And then, of course, there are bindings for JavaScript and all sorts of different languages that you might want to interact with the protocol, right? And as in terms of regulations, I'm not sure exactly what the question was there.
So when I talk about regulations, a lot of like how it is with blockchain and everything else going through the borderless systems that governments are against, banks are against, because it's just kind of it's an inconvenience for them. How are you avoiding the regulators from giving you fines, and how are you complying? That's essentially the question.
That's a very good question, and we have a very good legal department. They are also engaged with regulators and trying to influence legislation and talking to European, I think mainly European, not sure if it's also others. Don't want to say something wrong. European legislators, but the specifics, again, that's out of my reach. I'm sorry I have to say I don't know. I mean, I could tell you something, but that also doesn't. It's not worth the time, I think, and I might just say something wrong. So I need to say I don't know. I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. Not everyone doesn't know each question. At least you guys are dealing with the EU Commission, which is fine. No, there's no more from my side. If anyone else wants to ask questions, I would love to actually gather more of you guys so I can have a longer conversation from each department. Whether some of the foundations that you've got and some of the tech stack that you're using, etc., to go in a bit more detail, because it's IOTA is quite interesting, but it's very complicated for the average Joe.
Yes, yeah, it's a very
For someone like me, you mean?
IOTA
For
and the
Mary,
foundation are very big, I would say.
Yeah.
And we're doing many different things, and as I said before, we are in the process of excubating some of these things so that the foundation ultimately stays mainly a research and development and legal entity. So basically, like all these things you guys were interested in, like market adoption topics, like supply chain use cases with corporates, they are all going to be separate entities working with the protocol, right? But the foundation is basically the one that employs and is responsible for building the main protocol, the permissionless innovation hub, let's call it like that, and trying to talk to regulators and get the legal side built up. So that is this decentralized framework, basically, of the new entities and the foundation, and it is still in progress, basically, as many things are in the foundation. So it's hard, even for me working in the foundation, to have an overview of what all is happening, because there's just so many things happening at once. So I totally get what you're saying. Even I'm working there, and it's hard to keep up with everything.
Now, I'd love to know more, and I'd love to hear more from all of you guys, whether from engineers and also. Anyway, that's a different. I'll DM you anyway with that regards. But thank you for answering my questions. And Mary, thank you for unmuting me.
Thank
I
you,
was about to
John,
say thank you
for
for
coming up.
muting me.
I unmuted someone else, JD Sutton.
Hi, Mary. Thank you for putting this on. Thanks, Jonas, for discussing this. And I just wanted to say to the midnight show, it is really hard to kind of grasp the biggest around. I mean, I'm not a technical by any means, but I've been working with the community governance, building governance framework on the Treasury and stuff. But I just wanted to say, I think on the supply chain stuff, I think what's pretty awesome about IOTA, and maybe Jonas can tell me if I'm incorrect or not, but is that, I think, and I could be totally wrong, but again, I think on the supply chain, it's the IOTA's focus is on the data. So like the paperwork, and how important paperwork is into, supply and logistics when you're going out in and out of countries. I know I worked in Nigeria for a couple of years, and that was always one of the painstaking activities is, getting all the paperwork to be perfect. So the fact that they can sort of create that standard of paperwork in the digital immutable data rather than staying away from necessarily like a value transaction, I think that is some of the stuff that they've been working on. But I suggest probably can reach out to some of those IOTA guys who would love to talk about it. And I know some of those entities are now kind of privatizing in a sense. And like Matt Yarger, I know is one, and he's been working with Digital MRV, which is kind of a Project Alvarium project that came from Dell. And what they focus on is basically a level 1 where they collect data from the edge. And again, that data is coming through the Tangle, so it's immutable, and then also it's going through streams, which is basically anonymous. So you've got basically protected anonymous data going from point A to point B. And what they took that proof of concept when Dell was working with IOTA was that they turned it into the Digital MRV project, which is an ecosystem. And one project they're working on in Chile is where they took, if I remember correctly, basically a landfill, and the methane that's coming off that, they are using it to convert to energy. But the sensors that they have down there, they have 6 sensors collecting data. And that data is being used sort of, I think, for the government to audit, right? And, I work in oil and gas, and a lot of refineries will have an auditor come in and sort of they'll take their sensor data to make sure that, these facilities are being regulatory compliant. And then the question becomes, if they know the auditor's coming, they can kind of tweak some of their emissions output. But if you could have sensors there that are immutable, offer immutable data. So then I think where Dell and Project Alvarium, where they worked with a few other DLT protocols, had some issues. And, yes, some things can be very cheap, but, the fact that IOTA can be a feeless L1 with the data transfer is pretty awesome. And, where IOTA 2.0 comes in, and basically you have to have those resources. If you're not going to pay a miner or you're not going to put a stake, how do you do that transaction? And I think IOTA 2.0 is essentially, bandwidth, so that we can actually send this data. And then can the data be stored on the distributed ledger? And then the storage part, so you have 2 resources. And the mana, as long as you run a node, and essentially you're just supporting the system, so you're, essentially just running some electricity, but you're not paying anything, right? So it's yes, you're paying electricity, but you're not paying someone. So in a sense, it's feeless. And then with the storage deposit, you're essentially, for how much data you want to store on the protocol, you are depositing that IOTA token. And again, you're not paying anyone, it's yours. And then whenever you're done with your application, you simply take your deposit back. So it's a pretty awesome to me as a layman, as a non-techie, that it seems like potentially it could be a solution where it's feeless, but you still have these supply and demand aspects of what DLT needs to practice game theory. So I mean, I could be totally wrong. I was just trying to put out something that's a little bit more tangible. And Jonas, you let me know if I'm completely off. But
No, what I'm hearing is actually for developers, it's actually music to their ears, because we got understand when I work in tech, by the way. I'm a solutions architect and solutions consultant. So I do this for a living, for banking as well as other industries. But for a developer to allow them to actually have space where they can use it for free, it's actually godsend, because that means they'll encourage them to develop more and actually think outside the box without costing them, if that is the possibility that IOTA is offering. Because a lot of these big organizations do offer you free packages, but then it's not powerful enough to actually see your product flourish and work before you make it a live product.
Absolutely. So I suggest, I know Matt Yeager, and maybe Jonas can introduce you to Holger. He's created a company called Spice that's basically really built to help kind of on the corporate side get streamline access to some of these protocol innovations. But it's really awesome to hear what, like you said, some thinking outside the box and development. But thank you for hosting this. Appreciate it.
Maybe I can give my 5 cents to this. So I think the data use cases are valid, and the Tangle is very well suited for this, but I don't think in L1 is the right place to do it. Because, well, an L1 is by definition somehow scarce, right? At least in the sense if it's not sharded. And that makes, even if you have the system of mana, and I think we should maybe discuss this a bit more, and the 3 resources we need to protect that I mentioned before, even then access and sending something via this layer gets at some point expensive, right? Because, well, it's just market dynamics, right? If there's more demand, then this gets more expensive. And if you don't have enough tokens, then, well, you need to somehow see to pay someone else to include your data, or there is the possibility to buy mana in a sense. So you still need that resource, right? If you don't, and if there's high demand, then this might also get expensive. And that's also, maybe from there we can go a step back and look at the whole idea of the tokenomics within IOTA 2.0. This is not yet on the IOTA mainnet. This is also not on Shimmer, but this is how it's going to be in IOTA 2.0. So we have the token. The token has a fixed supply, right? We don't have any inflation or anything on the token. There's a fixed supply and it stays. The thing is that everyone gets, as I said before, an unconditional proportional amount to their holdings in mana. So you can imagine that as IOTA token being land, and mana is wood that you generate from the land, and then you can use that mana as fuel to send your transactions or your data. And that is unconditional. Everyone gets this. Now, the next question is, okay, how do we give an incentive to people to actually validate the network, right? Because we also want people to validate the network, but not in a sense that they are exploiting the network like miners that might just jump from network to network wherever they can make more profit and just sell the tokens, right? So basically extracting value out of the system. No, instead, we want to make the people that are actively participating in running a node, for example, or staking and validating, we want to reward them in access. That is basically our solution, right? We reward them in mana. So now you cannot simply run away and sell your reward on the market and dump the price. But you have to be more invested in the system, and the thing you get is access to the system. So you want the system to become better. So this should be like a circular loop, that more utility will lead to more demand, of course, right? The more demand you have, the more expensive it also gets to access the system. So the more valuable your mana gets, that means the more valuable your token gets, and the more valuable it is to participate in securing the network, and that ultimately leads to more utility again. So it's like a circular thing without extracting value out of the system, but perpetuating the system, and that is the idea of mana. And I hope I could explain this so that it makes sense for you guys.
Now even I understood. Thank you, Jonas. Very good.
And it's very in that sense it's very different and than other systems, right? And in that sense it also makes IOTA suited for such data applications, maybe, if you're willing to pay that mana, right? Because that might still get expensive if there's much demand, right? So, or if you have the amount of tokens, but you get, like, if you have it's also different, right? Because you don't need to expend your tokens. So you might have an upfront investment. So if you say you want to utilize L1 for your use case, and you buy now, I don't know, 5 million worth of token, then you can calculate that you have on average 10% of the bandwidth, for example. Depends on the current price, right? But in that.
So every time I buy IOTA, I get mana as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of. It's generated automatically as part of the ledger. It's an extension of the ledger. So you don't need to do anything. It's just there, basically.
All right. Cool. Well, I've learned some new things from IOTA, or everything was new for me actually, and it's very interesting, and I can just understand how vast this project is, and how much can be done with it, and I think we haven't even seen all that could be done yet. So it's an exciting time coming now for blockchain and for crypto, and how it can be used, I think. So yeah, good to be early. We're still early in here, I think.
Yes.
And is there something else, Jonas, that you want to add before we maybe wrap it up, because we have been here 1.5 hours soon?
Yes, so maybe I could gather from the conversation that there's some confusion around the current state of IOTA, right? And what exactly is IOTA 2.0 and these things. So maybe I can take some time to explain that.
Sure, go ahead.
So currently we have these two networks, Shimmer and IOTA. Shimmer is the staging network for IOTA, like Kusama for Polkadot. And on Shimmer, we have currently the Stardust upgrade live, which is a tokenization framework, which allows you to have native digital assets and NFTs and all these kind of things, and will enable, or it enables L2 smart contracts as well. And on IOTA, this upgrade will also come soon. And this is a first step into a direction of IOTA 2.0. And IOTA 2.0 is currently still in development. That's where I'm working at. And that's a very technical topic, and it's very exciting. And like I just explained, the tokenomics concept, roughly, that is all coming with IOTA 2.0. And similarly, the consensus we discussed before, that the leaderless consensus, that you cannot have MEV, that you cannot exploit the system in that sense, or that no one can exploit the system in that sense, is one important, very important cornerstone, together with this access, with this feeless access, if you have the tokens I think these two are the main innovations that IOTA 2.0 brings, and they're very, very, very different than the space is currently doing. Like most of the projects that are just throwing inflation at the people to make them participate, right? And we are trying to go a very different route there, and making it long-term sustainable. And another thing is that is often overlooked, I think, is the role of social consensus. I mean, Ethereum, I think, makes many things great, or does many things great. For example, they have this notion of weak subjectivity, like any proof of stake protocol, right? Because for people who don't know what it is, you can have like a long range attack. So if the committee at any point in time was in charge of describing what's happening, then if you get the keys of those committee members at that point in time, you technically can rewrite history, even if that committee was in charge only at the genesis of the chain or of IOTA or the DLT in general. The thing is, you prevent that by asking someone whether you're on the correct chain. Like, for example, you go to some block explorer and you get the block hash. And then when you sync up your node, because you come online later, you need to verify that you're on the canonical chain, it's called, on the correct chain. Because someone could present you with a valid chain too, but it's just not the correct chain. And that is very important as one aspect of social consensus, I think. And then if something happens, we have seen it time and time again, that people of the DLT and users might just come together and decide, okay, we're going to do a hard fork because something happened that shouldn't have happened, right? And we have seen it a few times. And that's why I think the social aspect is very important, and a DLT existing in a vacuum is only moderately useful, right? But it would be great if you can also integrate social consensus and social structures into this DLT as well. And that is another step that might not come with initial releases towards IOTA 2.0, but IOTA 2.0 is a process, I would say. And there are multiple stages to it. And the social aspect is another one that I think might be just very important and revolutionary, because in the end, it's what rules the world, right? Social structures and social consensus is bigger than whatever is decided in code in the end, right? So if you can model those, and we can with our consensus, because just the way we vote, it becomes very simple to have this abstraction, or we call it meta protocols on top, because, well, if you make a statement on the Tangle, so you just issue your transaction, then you're basically already making a statement. And then you can just listen to whoever makes a statement. And if you want to listen to governments, then you can see what they approve. Or if you want to listen to your grandma, you can also do that, or your friends. And then you can build your own perception based on this local social trust vector that you build for yourself. That's another, I think, big step regarding IOTA 2.0.
Nice. All right. So it's not the last time we see you here, maybe, or also maybe next time bring some other people with you as well, maybe, so we can have like discussions about many aspects of IOTA. It's very interesting for many in here, I think, to hear about your work with IOTA, with the engineering side of it. And I hope people in here enjoyed listening, and I hope to see you again, Jonas.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Thanks.
It was a
Thanks for the
pleasure.
questions.
Yeah.
Likewise.
And I think we will have to wrap it up now because it's, well, past already. So feel free to tell everyone who wasn't here to listen in if they want to the recording afterwards. Yeah, I hope to see everyone in here again. And thank you so much for coming, Jonas. Is there some last words that you would like to say to the audience in here about IOTA?
Yeah, just thanks everyone for their genuine interest. I'm always surprised. There's so many people that are genuinely interested and not only like degen interested in the money aspect of it. But I think we're building a cool technology, and really the permissionless innovation part is the most important one. So it's great that people are interested and are actually building things on top of what we are building.
Yeah,
thank you everyone,
for sure.
and thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Have a good, what is it today? Monday, I think. Have a good
Yes.
Monday, everyone.